Question 1. Stakeholder feedback indicates that applicants for a Porto di pistola per difesa personale in Italy are sometimes unclear about the level of evidence required to demonstrate a genuine need for self-defense. Considering the regulatory framework governing firearm permits in Italy, which of the following approaches best reflects the requirements for a successful application? Option A. Submitting a general statement expressing a desire for personal security and a fear of crime in the applicant's neighborhood. Option B. Relying on informal testimonials from friends and family attesting to the applicant's perceived need for protection. Option C. Presenting a history of minor, unsubstantiated altercations that do not clearly indicate a significant or ongoing threat. Option D. Providing detailed documentation of specific threats, incidents, or vulnerabilities that create a concrete and current risk to personal safety, supported by official reports or verifiable evidence. Correct answer is D. Providing detailed documentation of specific threats, incidents, or vulnerabilities that create a concrete and current risk to personal safety, supported by official reports or verifiable evidence. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to navigate the nuanced requirements for obtaining a concealed carry handgun license for personal defense in Italy, specifically the Porto di pistola per difesa personale. The core challenge lies in demonstrating a genuine and demonstrable need for self-defense that goes beyond generalized fear or hypothetical threats, as mandated by Italian law. A superficial or misleading application risks denial and potential legal repercussions. The correct approach involves meticulously gathering and presenting evidence that substantiates a concrete and current threat to personal safety. This includes official reports of threats, documented incidents of stalking or harassment, or evidence of a specific vulnerability that increases the risk of criminal activity. The applicant must demonstrate to the authorities, typically the prefettura, that the need for a firearm for personal defense is not speculative but a direct consequence of their circumstances. This aligns with Article 470 of the Italian Penal Code and related administrative regulations, which require a proven necessity and good cause for carrying a weapon. The authorities are tasked with assessing the credibility and severity of the claimed threat, and a comprehensive, verifiable application is crucial for a favorable outcome. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on a general statement of fear or a desire for personal security without providing specific, verifiable evidence of a heightened risk. This fails to meet the legal standard of demonstrating a concrete need for self-defense. Another incorrect approach is to misrepresent or exaggerate the nature or frequency of threats to create a stronger impression of need. This constitutes a violation of the good faith required in all dealings with public authorities and can lead to severe penalties, including the denial of the license and potential criminal charges for false statements. Finally, attempting to bypass the formal application process or relying on informal assurances from acquaintances rather than following the established legal procedures is also an unacceptable and ineffective approach, as it disregards the legal framework governing firearm permits in Italy. Professionals facing similar situations should adopt a structured decision-making process. First, thoroughly understand the specific legal requirements of the jurisdiction, in this case, Italian law regarding concealed carry permits. Second, gather all relevant documentation and evidence that directly supports the claim of need, ensuring its authenticity and accuracy. Third, present this information clearly and truthfully to the relevant authorities, adhering strictly to the prescribed application procedures. Fourth, be prepared to provide further clarification or evidence if requested by the authorities. This methodical and honest approach ensures compliance with regulations and maximizes the chances of a successful and lawful outcome. Question 2. Regulatory review indicates that an individual in Rome is seeking a concealed carry handgun license for personal defense. They have a history of minor disputes with neighbors that have never escalated to formal complaints or charges, and they believe this creates a general sense of unease. They have also recently experienced a minor financial setback. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the requirements for obtaining a Porto di pistola per difesa personale under Italian law? Option A. Focus solely on the financial setback, presenting it as a primary reason for needing a firearm due to increased risk of opportunistic crime. Option B. Clearly articulate the history of neighborly disputes, emphasizing the subjective feeling of unease, and provide documentation of recent financial difficulties as evidence of vulnerability. Option C. Omit any mention of neighborly disputes and only highlight the financial setback, framing it as a general concern for personal safety. Option D. Emphasize the subjective feeling of unease stemming from neighborly disputes as the primary justification, without providing specific evidence of threats or danger. The correct answer is B. Clearly articulate the history of neighborly disputes, emphasizing the subjective feeling of unease, and provide documentation of recent financial difficulties as evidence of vulnerability. Explanation. The scenario of applying for a concealed carry handgun license in Italy presents a professionally challenging situation due to the stringent legal requirements and the inherent responsibility associated with firearm ownership for personal defense. Applicants must demonstrate not only a genuine need for self-protection, but also a clear absence of disqualifying factors, requiring meticulous attention to detail and adherence to specific legal provisions. The challenge lies in navigating the bureaucratic process while ensuring all documentation and personal circumstances align perfectly with the requirements of Italian law, specifically the Consolidated Act on Public Security. Testo Unico del Legge di Pubblica Sicurezza TULPS. The correct approach involves a thorough and honest self-assessment of one's personal circumstances and a comprehensive understanding of the legal grounds for personal defense as defined by Italian law. This includes clearly articulating a demonstrable and concrete threat or risk that justifies the need for a firearm for personal defense, supported by objective evidence where possible. The applicant must also ensure they meet all the physical and psychological fitness requirements, as well as possess a clean criminal record and demonstrate good conduct. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the core tenets of Article 42 of the TULPS, which governs the issuance of permits for carrying weapons for personal defense. It emphasizes the need for a proven necessity and the applicant's suitability, aligning with the public safety objectives of the legislation. An incorrect approach would be to misrepresent or exaggerate the perceived threat to personal safety. This is a regulatory failure because Article 42 of the TULPS requires a genuine and demonstrable need, not a speculative or exaggerated one. Providing false or misleading information to the authorities can lead to the denial of the license and potential legal repercussions. Another incorrect approach is to overlook or downplay any past minor offenses or behavioral issues, assuming they are insignificant. This is an ethical and regulatory failure because the authorities will conduct thorough background checks, and any undisclosed or minimized disqualifying factors can result in the denial of the license and a loss of credibility. Furthermore, failing to provide complete and accurate documentation, such as medical certificates or proof of training, constitutes a procedural and regulatory failure, as it prevents the authorities from making a fully informed decision based on all required criteria. Professionals should approach such applications by first thoroughly researching and understanding the specific requirements of Article 42 of the TULPS and related decrees. They should then conduct an honest self-evaluation of their situation, gathering all necessary supporting documentation. If there are any potential disqualifying factors, it is advisable to seek legal counsel to understand how they might impact the application. Transparency and accuracy are paramount throughout the entire process. Question 3. Performance analysis shows that an applicant for a Porto di pistola per difesa personale in Italy is seeking a license based on a general feeling of unease due to rising crime statistics in their neighborhood and a past, unrelated minor theft incident at their residence. Which approach best aligns with the regulatory framework for obtaining such a license in Italy? Option A. Meticulously gather and present objective evidence that substantiates a specific and elevated threat to the applicant's personal safety, such as official police reports detailing threats or documented instances of criminal activity directly impacting their safety. Option B. Submit documentation highlighting the applicant's good character and lack of criminal record, along with general statistics on crime rates in their region. Option C. Provide a sworn affidavit from the applicant detailing their subjective feelings of fear and insecurity without providing specific, verifiable incidents. Option D. Emphasize the applicant's right to self-defense as a law-abiding citizen and their desire to feel more secure. The correct answer is A. Meticulously gather and present objective evidence that substantiates a specific and elevated threat to the applicant's personal safety, such as official police reports detailing threats or documented instances of criminal activity directly impacting their safety. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to navigate the complex and nuanced requirements for obtaining a concealed carry handgun license in Italy, specifically the Porto di pistola per difesa personale. The core challenge lies in demonstrating a genuine and demonstrable need for personal defense that goes beyond mere apprehension or a general desire for self-protection. Italian law is strict in this regard, requiring concrete evidence of a specific, elevated risk to personal safety. Misinterpreting or misrepresenting this need can lead to denial of the license, and in more serious cases, potential legal repercussions if false information is provided. Careful judgment is required to accurately assess the applicant's situation against the legal standards. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves meticulously gathering and presenting objective evidence that substantiates a specific and elevated threat to the applicant's personal safety. This includes documentation such as official police reports detailing threats, evidence of stalking, documented instances of criminal activity in the applicant's immediate vicinity that directly impact their safety, or professional circumstances that inherently expose them to significant danger. The justification for this approach is rooted in Article 42 of the Italian Consolidated Law on Public Security, Testo Unico del Legge di Pubblica Sicurezza TOLPS, which mandates that the issuance of a handgun license for personal defense is contingent upon demonstrating a concrete and current need for protection against specific dangers. The prefect, who grants the license, must be convinced of this necessity based on verifiable facts, not subjective fears. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to rely solely on subjective feelings of insecurity or general concerns about crime rates in the applicant's area. This fails to meet the legal standard of demonstrating a specific and elevated threat. The law requires more than a generalized fear. It demands evidence of a particular danger that warrants the carrying of a firearm for defense. Another incorrect approach is to submit incomplete or fabricated documentation. Providing false information or omitting crucial details to create a misleading impression of danger is a serious ethical and legal violation. This undermines the integrity of the licensing process and can lead to severe penalties, including the denial of the license and potential criminal charges. A third incorrect approach is to argue that the applicant has a right to carry a handgun for self-defense simply because they are a law-abiding citizen. While being a law-abiding citizen is a prerequisite, it does not automatically confer a right to carry a concealed weapon for personal defense under Italian law. The focus remains on the demonstrable need for protection against specific threats. Professional reasoning. Professionals assisting applicants for a Porto di pistola per difesa personale should adopt a rigorous, evidence-based methodology. This involves thoroughly understanding the specific requirements of Article 42 of the TOLPS and advising applicants to gather only verifiable and objective evidence that directly addresses the legal criteria for a demonstrable need for personal defense. It is crucial to manage applicant expectations, emphasizing that the license is granted based on proven necessity, not on generalized fears or perceived rights. Transparency and honesty in presenting the applicant's situation are paramount, ensuring that all submitted information is accurate and complete. Question 4. The efficiency study reveals that some applicants for the Porto di pistola per difesa personale in Italy struggle to articulate the specific ongoing threats that justify their need for a handgun for personal defense. Considering the requirements of Article 42 of the TULPS, which approach best demonstrates a genuine and current necessity for personal defense? Option A. Providing a brief, unsubstantiated claim of needing a firearm for protection, relying on the applicant's reputation or perceived social standing to imply a need. Option B. Presenting a comprehensive dossier of evidence, including official reports of threats, documentation of previous incidents, and a detailed explanation of why less restrictive security measures are inadequate for the applicant's specific circumstances. Option C. Submitting a general statement expressing fear for personal safety due to perceived increases in local crime rates, without specific incidents or threats directed at the applicant. Option D. Including a list of potential threats without providing any corroborating evidence or official documentation, assuming the authorities will accept the applicant's word. The correct answer is B. Presenting a comprehensive dossier of evidence, including official reports of threats, documentation of previous incidents, and a detailed explanation of why less restrictive security measures are inadequate for the applicant's specific circumstances. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a recurring issue in the application process for the Porto di pistola per difesa personale in Italy. Applicants sometimes misunderstand the nuances of demonstrating a genuine and current need for personal defense, leading to delays or rejections. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of Italian law, specifically Article 42 of the T.U.L.P.S. Testo Unico delle Leggi di Pubblica Sicurezza, which governs the issuance of firearms licenses for personal defense. The challenge lies in interpreting necessità attuale, current necessity, and giustificato motivo, justified reason, in a way that satisfies the prefect's discretion while remaining objective and evidence-based. A careful judgment is required to balance the applicant's perceived threat with the state's interest in public safety and the responsible ownership of firearms. The correct approach involves meticulously documenting and presenting evidence that clearly establishes a specific, ongoing, and credible threat to the applicant's personal safety that cannot be adequately mitigated by other means. This includes providing official reports of threats, evidence of previous incidents, demonstrable vulnerabilities in the applicant's lifestyle or location, and a clear explanation of why less restrictive measures are insufficient. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the legal requirements of Article 42 T.U.L.P.S. by providing concrete, verifiable proof of a necessità attuale and giustificato motivo. It aligns with the principle that the burden of proof rests with the applicant to demonstrate a legitimate need, and that the prefect's decision must be based on objective assessments of risk, not mere subjective fear. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on general statements of fear, or a perceived increase in crime rates in the applicant's area, without specific personal threats. This is a regulatory failure because it does not demonstrate a necessità attuale directly impacting the applicant, but rather a generalized concern. Another incorrect approach is to submit an incomplete application with missing documentation or vague justifications, failing to provide the necessary evidence to support the claim of personal defense. This is an ethical and regulatory failure, as it demonstrates a lack of seriousness and respect for the legal process and the authorities responsible for public safety. Finally, an approach that attempts to circumvent the process by misrepresenting facts or omitting crucial information is a severe ethical and legal violation, undermining the integrity of the licensing system and posing a significant risk to public safety. Professionals should employ a systematic decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the applicant's circumstances and a comprehensive review of the legal requirements under Article 42 T.U.L.P.S. This involves actively gathering all relevant evidence, assessing its credibility and sufficiency, and constructing a clear, logical, and well-supported application that directly addresses the legal criteria. If the evidence is insufficient, professionals should advise the applicant on how to strengthen their case or explain why an application is unlikely to be successful, rather than submitting a weak or misleading one. Question 5. The control framework reveals that an applicant for a Porto di pistola per difesa personale in Italy has a documented history of several minor public disturbances and altercations that did not result in criminal convictions, but were noted by local law enforcement. The prefect's office is reviewing the application. Which of the following approaches best adheres to the regulatory requirements for assessing the applicant's suitability? Option A. Grant the permit as long as the applicant has no formal criminal convictions, disregarding the documented history of minor disturbances. Option B. Automatically deny the application based on the presence of any documented altercations, irrespective of their severity or the time elapsed since they occurred. Option C. Rely on informal assurances from local law enforcement that the applicant is generally a good person without a formal, documented investigation into the specific altercations. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive review of the nature, frequency, and context of the past altercations, alongside other character references and evidence of rehabilitation, to determine if they indicate a propensity for violence or a lack of good conduct as defined by Article 43 of the T.U.L.P.S. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive review of the nature, frequency, and context of the past altercations, alongside other character references and evidence of rehabilitation, to determine if they indicate a propensity for violence or a lack of good conduct as defined by Article 43 of the TULPS. Explanation. The control framework reveals a scenario where an applicant for a Porto di pistola per difesa personale in Italy has a history of minor altercations. This situation is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced assessment of an individual's suitability for carrying a firearm for personal defense, balancing the applicant's right to self-defense with public safety concerns. The prefect's office must meticulously evaluate the applicant's past behavior against the stringent requirements of Italian law, specifically Article 43 of the TULPS, Testo Unico del Legge di Pubblica Sicurezza, which mandates that applicants must demonstrate good conduct and not be persons of known bad character or be subject to measures that would indicate a propensity for violence. The assessment is not merely about the absence of serious criminal convictions, but also about the overall pattern of behavior and the potential risk posed. The best professional approach involves a thorough and documented investigation into the nature and frequency of the applicant's past altercations, considering their context, the applicant's age at the time, and any evidence of rehabilitation or remorse. This approach aligns with the spirit and letter of the TULPS, which emphasizes a comprehensive evaluation of the applicant's character and reliability. The prefect must weigh whether these past incidents, even if minor, indicate a character trait that would make the applicant a risk to public safety or themselves if granted a concealed carry permit. This requires careful consideration of all submitted documentation, potential interviews, and consultation with relevant authorities, ensuring a decision is made based on objective evidence and a reasoned assessment of risk, rather than on assumptions or expediency. An approach that focuses solely on the absence of major criminal convictions and overlooks the documented history of minor altercations is professionally unacceptable. This failure to consider the full scope of the applicant's conduct directly contravenes the TULPS requirement to assess buona condotta, good conduct, and the prohibition against issuing permits to individuals whose behavior suggests a propensity for violence. Such an approach risks granting a license to someone who, despite no serious convictions, may still pose an unacceptable risk. Another professionally unacceptable approach is to automatically deny the permit based solely on the existence of any past altercation, regardless of its severity, age, or context. While caution is warranted, Italian law requires a reasoned assessment, not an automatic disqualification. This rigid stance fails to acknowledge that minor incidents, especially from one's youth, may not be indicative of current character or future behavior, and it disregards the possibility of rehabilitation. Finally, an approach that relies on informal recommendations or personal opinions without rigorous investigation and documentation is also professionally unsound. The decision to grant or deny a concealed carry permit is a significant administrative act with public safety implications. It must be grounded in objective evidence and a transparent, legally compliant process, not on subjective impressions or hearsay. Professionals should employ a decision-making process that begins with a clear understanding of the legal requirements under the TULPS. This involves gathering all relevant documentation, conducting a thorough background check that includes minor incidents, assessing the context and severity of any past altercations, and evaluating evidence of the applicant's current character and reliability. The process must be objective, evidence-based, and documented, ensuring that the final decision is justifiable and defensible under Italian law. Question 6. The audit findings indicate that an applicant for a Porto di pistola per difesa personale in Italy has submitted documentation asserting a need for personal defense due to perceived threats from a former business associate. However, the provided evidence consists primarily of anecdotal accounts and lacks official police reports or formal restraining orders. What is the most appropriate course of action for the licensing authority to ensure compliance with Italian firearms regulations? Option A. Advise the applicant to seek a restraining order and then reapply for the license once such an order is granted, without independently assessing the current evidence of threat. Option B. Request further corroborating evidence from the applicant, such as official police reports, witness statements, or any legal documentation that substantiates the claimed threats before making a decision on the license application. Option C. Deny the license application immediately due to the insufficiency of the provided evidence, without giving the applicant an opportunity to supplement their submission. Option D. Issue the concealed carry handgun license based on the applicant's sworn statement of fear, as the subjective perception of threat is sufficient grounds for personal defense under Italian law. The correct answer is B. Request further corroborating evidence from the applicant, such as official police reports, witness statements, or any legal documentation that substantiates the claimed threats, before making a decision on the license application. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential lapse in adherence to the stringent requirements for obtaining and maintaining a concealed carry handgun license, Porto di pistola per difesa personale, in Italy. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of Italian firearms law, specifically the provisions related to personal defense, and the ability to interpret and apply these laws to a practical situation involving an applicant's circumstances. The auditor's concern highlights the critical importance of thoroughness and accuracy in the licensing process, as any deviation can have significant legal and public safety implications. The correct approach involves a meticulous review of the applicant's documentation and a comprehensive assessment of their stated need for personal defense, ensuring it aligns with the legal criteria established by Italian law. This includes verifying that the applicant has demonstrated a genuine and current threat or a well-founded fear of harm that cannot be adequately addressed by other means. The applicant must also prove they are of good character and possess the necessary mental and physical faculties to safely handle a firearm, as stipulated by the relevant articles of the Testo Unico delle Leggi di Pubblica Sicurezza, TULPS, and its implementing regulations. The licensing authority has a duty to ensure that only those who meet these strict requirements are granted a license, thereby upholding public safety and the integrity of the firearms licensing system. An incorrect approach would be to grant the license based solely on the applicant's assertion of needing protection, without independent verification or a thorough assessment of the evidence presented. This fails to meet the legal obligation to establish a demonstrable need for personal defense, as required by Italian law, and could lead to the issuance of a license to an individual who does not qualify, thereby compromising public safety. Another incorrect approach would be to overlook discrepancies in the applicant's background check or character references, as Italian law places significant emphasis on the applicant's trustworthiness and good conduct. Ignoring such red flags would be a direct violation of the licensing requirements and could have severe consequences. Finally, accepting incomplete or outdated documentation without requesting the necessary supplementary information would also be a failure to comply with the procedural requirements for license application, potentially rendering the license invalid. Professional reasoning in such situations requires a commitment to upholding the law, prioritizing public safety, and maintaining the integrity of the licensing process. Professionals must adopt a diligent and evidence-based approach, critically evaluating all aspects of an application against the specific legal framework. This involves understanding the spirit and letter of the law, conducting thorough due diligence, and making decisions that are defensible and justifiable under Italian firearms regulations. Question 7. The control framework reveals that an applicant for a Porto di pistola per difesa personale in Italy has a documented history of 2 minor public disturbances occurring 5 and 7 years ago, respectively, for which they received warnings but no convictions. The applicant states these were isolated incidents stemming from youthful indiscretion, and that they have had no further issues. They have a clear and verifiable need for personal defense due to their profession, which approach best balances regulatory compliance with the applicant's rights and public safety. Option A. Grant the license, but impose a significantly shorter validity period and require mandatory annual reevaluation without investigating the specifics of the past incidents. Option B. Grant the license without further inquiry, assuming that minor disturbances from several years ago are irrelevant to current suitability. Option C. Conduct a thorough investigation into the nature and context of the past disturbances, interview the applicant to understand their perspective and current stability, and assess if these incidents demonstrate a propensity for violence or a present risk to public safety before making a decision. Option D. Automatically deny the application due to the existence of any past altercations, regardless of their severity or the time elapsed. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough investigation into the nature and context of the past disturbances, interview the applicant to understand their perspective and current stability, and assess if these incidents demonstrate a propensity for violence or a present risk to public safety before making a decision. Explanation. The control framework reveals a scenario where an applicant for a Porto di pistola per difesa personale in Italy has a history of minor altercations. This situation is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced assessment of the applicant's suitability, balancing their right to self-defense with the public safety imperative. The Italian legal framework for concealed carry permits, governed by Articles 42 and 43 of the Testo Unico delle Leggi di Pubblica Sicurezza, TULPS, and related ministerial decrees, mandates that applicants must demonstrate not only a genuine need for personal defense, but also possess good conduct and be free from any circumstances that might indicate a propensity for violence or misuse of a firearm. A superficial review might overlook the significance of past incidents, while an overly strict interpretation could unfairly deny a legitimate applicant. Careful judgment is required to interpret buona condotta, good conduct, in the context of the specific incidents and the applicant's overall profile. The best professional approach involves a thorough investigation into the nature and context of the applicant's past altercations. This includes obtaining official records, interviewing the applicant to understand their perspective and any mitigating factors, and assessing their current demeanor and stability. The focus should be on whether these past incidents demonstrate a pattern of aggression, a lack of respect for the law, or a present risk to public safety. If the altercations were isolated, minor, and demonstrably not indicative of a propensity for violence, and if the applicant can provide a compelling and verifiable reason for needing personal defense, then granting the license, possibly with specific conditions or a shorter validity period, could be justified under the TULPS. This approach aligns with the principle of proportionality, ensuring that the denial of a right is based on a demonstrable risk rather than a mere past infraction. An incorrect approach would be to automatically deny the license based solely on the existence of any past altercation, regardless of its severity, context, or recency. This fails to adhere to the TULPS requirement for a comprehensive assessment of buona condotta and the applicant's overall suitability. It also overlooks the possibility that individuals can learn from past mistakes and demonstrate rehabilitation. Another incorrect approach would be to grant the license without any further investigation into the nature of the altercations, assuming that any past incident is too minor to be relevant. This disregards the public safety implications and the responsibility of the licensing authority to ensure that firearms are entrusted only to those who pose no undue risk. Finally, relying solely on the applicant's self-reporting without independent verification or a deeper inquiry into the circumstances of the altercations would be professionally negligent and a failure to meet the due diligence required by Italian law. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes a holistic and evidence-based assessment. This involves 1. Understanding the specific legal requirements of the TULPS regarding buona condotta and personal defense needs. 2. Conducting a thorough background check that goes beyond mere record-keeping to understand the context and severity of any past incidents. 3. Engaging in direct communication with the applicant to gauge their understanding, remorse, and current disposition. 4. Consulting with relevant authorities or experts if necessary to assess risk. 5. Making a decision that is clearly documented, justifiable by the evidence, and consistent with both the applicant's rights and the paramount need for public safety. Question 8. Compliance review shows an applicant for a Porto di pistola per difesa personale in Italy has submitted an application citing a general feeling of unease due to rising crime rates in their neighborhood and a past, unsubstantiated rumor of a potential threat from a former business associate. What is the most appropriate risk assessment approach for the prefect's office to adopt? Option A. Issue the permit, considering the applicant's past responsible ownership of firearms for sport as sufficient evidence of their suitability for carrying a concealed weapon for self-defense. Option B. Grant the permit based on the applicant's subjective feeling of insecurity and the unsubstantiated rumor, as a precautionary measure given the perceived increase in local crime. Option C. Conduct a thorough investigation into the specific nature, recency, and evidence of any direct threats against the applicant, verifying if other protective measures have been explored, to determine if a proven, concrete, and current need for personal defense exists as per Article 42 of the TULPS. Option D. Deny the permit solely because the applicant's profession, while not explicitly high risk, is not considered inherently dangerous enough to warrant concealed carry. correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough investigation into the specific nature, recency, and evidence of any direct threats against the applicant, verifying if other protective measures have been explored, to determine if a proven, concrete, and current need for personal defense exists as per Article 42 of the TOLPS. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between an applicant's stated need for self-defense and the stringent requirements for obtaining a concealed carry permit in Italy. The prefect's office must meticulously assess the genuine and demonstrable nature of the threat, moving beyond mere subjective fear. This requires a nuanced understanding of Italian law concerning legittima difesa, self-defense, and the burden of proof placed on the applicant. A failure to conduct a thorough risk assessment can lead to either the unwarranted issuance of a permit, potentially compromising public safety, or the unjust denial of a legitimate need, infringing upon an individual's rights. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a comprehensive evaluation of the applicant's documented history of threats, the severity and recency of these threats, and any concrete evidence of their impact on the applicant's life and safety. This approach aligns with Article 42 of the Italian Consolidated Law on Public Security, Testo Unico del Legge di Pubblica Sicurezza TOLPS, which mandates that permits for carrying weapons for personal defense are granted only when there is a proven, concrete, and current need for protection against specific dangers that cannot be adequately addressed by other means. The prefect must verify that the applicant has exhausted all other reasonable protective measures and that the perceived threat is not speculative or based on generalized anxieties. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to grant the permit based solely on the applicant's subjective feeling of insecurity or a general fear of crime in their area, without requiring specific, verifiable evidence of a direct threat. This fails to meet the legal standard of a proven and concrete need as stipulated by Article 42 of the TOLPS, potentially leading to the issuance of a permit to someone who does not meet the strict criteria for self-defense. Another incorrect approach is to deny the permit based on the applicant's profession alone, without a thorough investigation into the specific risks associated with their individual circumstances. While certain professions might inherently carry higher risks, Italian law requires an individualized assessment of the threat, not a blanket denial based on occupational categories. This approach risks overlooking genuine threats faced by individuals within those professions. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on the applicant's past ownership of firearms for sport or collection as evidence of their suitability to carry a concealed weapon for self-defense. While a clean record in firearm ownership can be a positive factor, it does not automatically satisfy the requirement of a proven, concrete, and current need for personal protection against specific dangers. The focus must remain on the demonstrable threat, not on prior recreational or collection-based firearm possession. Professional reasoning. Professionals tasked with reviewing concealed carry permit applications in Italy must adopt a systematic and evidence-based approach. This involves 1. Clearly identifying the legal requirements under Article 42 of the TOLPS, emphasizing the need for a proven, concrete, and current danger. 2. Actively seeking and rigorously evaluating objective evidence presented by the applicant, such as police reports, restraining orders, or documented threats. 3. Conducting independent inquiries where necessary to corroborate the applicant's claims. 4. Maintaining a balanced perspective, acknowledging the right to self-defense while upholding the paramount importance of public safety. The decision-making process should be transparent and well-documented, ensuring that all assessments are grounded in legal mandates and factual evidence. Question 9. Cost-benefit analysis shows that for an applicant seeking a concealed carry handgun license, Porto di pistola per difesa personale in Italy, what is the most crucial element to demonstrate to the licensing authorities? Option A. The applicant's financial capacity to purchase and maintain a firearm and ammunition. Option B. The applicant's extensive experience and training in the safe handling and use of firearms. Option C. A general feeling of insecurity due to rising crime rates in the applicant's region. Option D. Specific, credible, and documented threats to the applicant's personal safety that necessitate the carrying of a firearm for defense. The correct answer is D. Specific, credible, and documented threats to the applicant's personal safety that necessitate the carrying of a firearm for defense. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant for a concealed carry handgun license in Italy, Porto di pistola per difesa personale, to navigate the complex interplay between demonstrating a genuine need for self-defense and the stringent requirements set by Italian law. The risk assessment process is not merely a formality. It is a critical evaluation by the authorities to determine if the applicant's perceived threats are credible and if carrying a firearm is a proportionate and necessary measure, rather than an overreaction or a potential risk to public safety. The applicant must present a compelling case that goes beyond generalized fear, supported by concrete evidence, while the licensing authority must exercise due diligence to prevent the issuance of licenses to individuals who may pose a risk. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough and documented risk assessment that meticulously details specific, credible threats to the applicant's personal safety. This approach requires the applicant to provide concrete evidence, such as police reports of past incidents, documented threats, or evidence of specific vulnerabilities that make them a target. The assessment should clearly articulate why a firearm is considered a necessary and proportionate response to these identified risks, demonstrating that less restrictive measures have been considered or are insufficient. This aligns with the principles of Italian law governing the issuance of concealed carry permits, which mandate a demonstrable and exceptional need for self-defense, emphasizing that the license is a privilege granted only when public safety is not compromised and the applicant's life is demonstrably at risk. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that relies solely on a generalized fear of crime or a desire for personal security without specific, verifiable threats is professionally unacceptable. Italian law requires more than a subjective feeling of insecurity. It demands objective evidence of a concrete and immediate danger. This approach fails to meet the legal threshold for demonstrating a genuine need for self-defense. An approach that exaggerates or fabricates threats to meet the licensing requirements is ethically and legally unsound. This misrepresents the applicant's situation to the authorities, undermining the integrity of the licensing process and potentially endangering public safety if a license is granted based on false pretenses. Such deception can lead to the denial of the license and potential legal repercussions. An approach that focuses primarily on the applicant's financial ability to purchase a firearm or their proficiency in its use, without adequately addressing the core requirement of a demonstrable need for self-defense, is also professionally flawed. While financial stability and marksmanship are important considerations, they do not substitute for the fundamental legal prerequisite of proving an exceptional and specific threat to personal safety. Professional reasoning. Professionals involved in assisting applicants for concealed carry permits in Italy must adopt a decision-making framework centered on rigorous evidence gathering and honest representation. This involves guiding applicants to identify and document specific threats, understanding that generalized fears are insufficient. The process should emphasize the proportionality of carrying a firearm as a last resort, after exploring other safety measures. Transparency and adherence to the letter and spirit of Italian law are paramount to ensure that licenses are granted responsibly and that public safety is maintained. Question 10. Operational review demonstrates that an applicant for a Porto di pistola per difesa personale in Italy has an annual gross income of Euros 45,000. Their documented essential annual expenses, rent, utilities, food, essential transportation, and essential medical costs total Euros 30,000. The applicant also states they have Euros 5,000 in outstanding consumer debt that they are actively repaying. Based on these figures, what is the applicant's net disposable income available for discretionary spending and unforeseen financial circumstances, and how should this be factored into the risk assessment for their license application? Option A. The applicant's net disposable income is Euros 15,000 annually, Euros 45,000, Euros 30,000. This amount is sufficient for personal defense, and the outstanding debt is a separate matter not directly impacting the need for a license. Option B. The applicant's net disposable income is Euros 40,000 annually, Euros 45,000, Euros 5,000. This calculation incorrectly excludes essential living expenses, failing to provide a realistic picture of the applicant's financial capacity to manage the responsibilities of a handgun license. Option C. The applicant's net disposable income is Euros 10,000 annually, Euros 45,000, Euros 30,000. euros 5,000. This figure, representing a reasonable buffer after essential expenses and debt repayment, suggests a stable financial foundation, which is a positive factor in the risk assessment for a personal defense handgun license. Option D. The applicant's net disposable income is euros 15,000 annually, euros 45,000, euros 30,000. This amount, while seemingly sufficient, does not account for the applicant's existing debt, which could represent a future financial strain, impacting their ability to maintain the license responsibly. The correct answer is C. The applicant's net disposable income is euros 10,000 annually, euros 45,000, euros 30,000, euros 5,000. This figure, representing a reasonable buffer after essential expenses and debt repayment, suggests a stable financial foundation, which is a positive factor in the risk assessment for a personal defense handgun license. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in assessing the financial viability and risk associated with a concealed carry handgun license application in Italy. The applicant's financial situation directly impacts their ability to demonstrate a genuine need for personal defense, as stipulated by Italian law. A thorough risk assessment requires not only understanding the applicant's income and expenses, but also projecting future financial stability and its correlation with the perceived threat level. The challenge lies in quantifying these subjective elements within the objective framework of Italian regulations governing the issuance of such licenses. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves a detailed calculation of the applicant's net disposable income after essential living expenses and a projection of their financial capacity to maintain the license and associated responsibilities. This requires calculating the applicant's annual income, subtracting documented essential expenses, rent, utilities, food, essential transportation, essential medical costs, and then assessing the remaining disposable income. This disposable income should then be compared against a benchmark representing a reasonable financial buffer for unforeseen circumstances and the ongoing costs of firearm ownership and maintenance, as implicitly understood within the spirit of Italian law for personal defense permits. Specifically, one would calculate net disposable income equals annual income, annual essential expenses. This figure should then be evaluated against a threshold that ensures the applicant can demonstrably afford the upkeep of a firearm and ammunition, and importantly, that their financial stability does not itself represent a risk factor, e.g., extreme debt leading to desperate measures. This aligns with the principle that a license should only be granted to individuals who are financially responsible and whose circumstances do not create additional risks. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to solely focus on the applicant's gross annual income without considering their essential expenditures. This fails to account for the applicant's actual financial capacity and could lead to granting a license to someone who, despite a high gross income, has significant financial obligations that leave them vulnerable or unable to properly maintain the firearm. This overlooks the practical implications of financial stability required by Italian law. Another incorrect approach is to simply accept the applicant's stated financial need for personal defense without any quantitative verification. Italian law requires a demonstrable need, and while financial hardship can contribute to perceived threats, it cannot be the sole basis for a license without objective assessment. This approach bypasses the crucial risk assessment component and relies on subjective claims. A third incorrect approach is to calculate the applicant's disposable income, but fail to project its sustainability or consider the ongoing costs of firearm ownership. For instance, if the disposable income is marginal and the applicant has no savings or contingency plan, their financial situation could deteriorate, creating a future risk. This neglects the long-term responsibility associated with carrying a firearm for personal defense. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic, data-driven approach to financial risk assessment. This involves gathering all relevant financial documentation, performing precise calculations of income and expenses, and projecting future financial stability. The decision-making process should be guided by the specific legal requirements of Italy for concealed carry permits, emphasizing demonstrable need and financial responsibility. Professionals must be able to articulate the quantitative basis for their assessment, ensuring that decisions are not only compliant with regulations, but also ethically sound and contribute to public safety. Question 11. The monitoring system demonstrates that an applicant for a Porto di pistola per difesa personale in Italy has recently reported a series of minor disputes with neighbors and expressed general unease about the neighborhood's rising crime statistics, but has not provided any specific documented threats or incidents directly targeting them. Which approach best aligns with the regulatory framework for assessing the genuine need for personal defense? Option A. Conduct a detailed investigation into the reported disputes and neighborhood crime statistics, seeking any available official reports or witness statement to objectively assess the credibility and immediacy of the threat to the applicant's personal safety. Option B. Deny the application outright due to the lack of specific documented threats, without further investigation into the context of the reported disputes or crime statistics. Option C. Advise the applicant to exaggerate the severity of the neighbor disputes and invent a plausible, but unsubstantiated, threat to strengthen their application. Option D. Recommend immediate approval of the concealed carry permit based on the applicant's expressed unease and the general crime statistics, assuming a proactive stance on potential future threats. The correct answer is A. Conduct a detailed investigation into the reported disputes and neighborhood crime statistics, seeking any available official reports or witness statement to objectively assess the credibility and immediacy of the threat to the applicant's personal safety. Explanation. The monitoring system demonstrates a potential discrepancy in the applicant's stated need for personal defense, which is a critical component of the Porto di pistola per difesa personale application in Italy. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the applicant to balance the need to present a compelling case for self-defense with the legal and ethical obligations to provide truthful and accurate information. Misrepresenting or exaggerating threats can lead to license denial, and in severe cases, legal repercussions. The core of the challenge lies in objectively assessing and articulating a genuine, demonstrable risk that justifies the carrying of a concealed handgun, as per Italian law. The best professional approach involves a thorough and objective assessment of the applicant's circumstances, supported by verifiable evidence. This includes meticulously documenting any specific threats, incidents, or patterns of behavior that create a credible and immediate risk to the applicant's personal safety. The documentation should be factual, detailed, and presented in a manner that clearly articulates the necessity for personal defense, aligning with the requirements of the Italian legislation governing the issuance of concealed carry permits. This approach ensures transparency, honesty, and a strong legal foundation for the application, demonstrating due diligence and respect for the regulatory process. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on vague assertions of fear or general anxieties about crime without concrete evidence. This fails to meet the legal standard for demonstrating a specific and immediate need for self-defense, as Italian law requires more than mere apprehension. Another incorrect approach involves fabricating or exaggerating threats to strengthen the application. This is not only unethical, but also constitutes a violation of the law, potentially leading to severe penalties and a permanent ban from obtaining such permits. A third incorrect approach is to submit an incomplete application, omitting relevant details about potential threats or security concerns. This demonstrates a lack of seriousness and an unwillingness to fully engage with the application process, which is likely to result in denial. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the specific legal requirements for a Porto di pistola per difesa personale in Italy. This involves researching and adhering to the principles outlined in the Testo Unico delle Leggi di Pubblica Sicurezza (TULPS) and related ministerial decrees. The decision-making process should prioritize objective evidence gathering, truthful representation of facts, and a clear articulation of the demonstrable risk to personal safety. If there is genuine concern, it must be substantiated. If the evidence does not meet the legal threshold, it is more prudent to acknowledge this rather than to misrepresent the situation. Question 12. System analysis indicates a need to reevaluate the process for issuing concealed carry handgun licenses, Porto di pistola per difesa personale, in Italy. Considering the principles of risk assessment, which of the following methodologies would best ensure compliance with Italian regulations and uphold public safety? Option A. Comprehensive risk assessment that meticulously evaluates the applicant's stated reasons for needing a concealed carry permit, cross-referencing them with objective evidence, and assessing their psychological suitability and understanding of firearm safety and legal obligations. Option B. Issuing the license based solely on the applicant's subjective assertion of fear, without independent verification or assessment of their suitability. Option C. Denying the license solely based on a perceived inconvenience or a general reluctance to issue such permits, without a thorough investigation into the applicant's specific circumstances and the objective evidence supporting their claim of personal defense needs. Option D. Focusing exclusively on the applicant's financial stability or social standing as a primary criterion for granting the license, rather than on their genuine need for self-defense and their demonstrated responsibility. The correct answer is A. A comprehensive risk assessment that meticulously evaluates the applicant's stated reasons for needing a concealed carry permit, cross-referencing them with objective evidence, and assessing their psychological suitability and understanding of firearm safety and legal obligations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the applicant to demonstrate not only a genuine need for personal defense, but also the capacity to handle a firearm responsibly and ethically, as mandated by Italian law. The assessment must balance the individual's stated need against potential risks to public safety, necessitating a thorough and nuanced evaluation of their character, circumstances, and understanding of legal responsibilities. A superficial assessment could lead to the issuance of a license to someone who poses an undue risk, while an overly stringent approach might deny a legitimate need. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that meticulously evaluates the applicant's stated reasons for needing a concealed carry permit in Italy, cross-referencing them with objective evidence, and assessing their psychological suitability and understanding of firearm safety and legal obligations. This includes verifying the credibility of threats, assessing the applicant's history for any indicators of impulsivity or aggression, and confirming their knowledge of Italian laws regarding the use of force and the carrying of firearms. This aligns with the spirit and letter of Italian legislation, which requires a demonstrable and concrete need for personal defense and a proven capacity for responsible ownership and use. The focus is on a holistic evaluation of risk and suitability. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to grant the license based solely on the applicant's subjective assertion of fear, without independent verification or assessment of their suitability. This fails to meet the legal requirement for a demonstrable need and ignores the crucial aspect of assessing the applicant's character and potential risk to public safety, thereby violating the principle of responsible firearm licensing. Another incorrect approach would be to deny the license solely based on a perceived inconvenience or a general reluctance to issue such permits, without a thorough investigation into the applicant's specific circumstances and the objective evidence supporting their claim of personal defense needs. This approach disregards the legal framework that allows for the issuance of permits under specific, justifiable conditions and fails to conduct a proper risk assessment. A third incorrect approach would be to focus exclusively on the applicant's financial stability or social standing as a primary criterion for granting the license, rather than on their genuine need for self-defense and their demonstrated responsibility. This introduces irrelevant factors into the decision-making process and deviates from the legal requirements for assessing suitability and need. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured, evidence-based approach to risk assessment. This involves clearly defining the criteria for a legitimate need for personal defense under Italian law, gathering objective evidence to support or refute the applicant's claims, and conducting a thorough evaluation of the applicant's psychological disposition and understanding of legal responsibilities. Decision-making should be guided by a commitment to public safety while respecting individual rights, ensuring that all licensing decisions are fair, consistent, and legally sound. Question 13. Implementation of a personal defense handgun license application in Italy requires a thorough risk assessment by the prefect. Considering the legal framework for the Porto di pistola per difesa personale, which of the following approaches best demonstrates compliance and a genuine need for such a license? Option A. Presenting a history of minor, unrelated legal infractions without disclosing their full context, assuming they are not directly relevant to firearm possession. Option B. Emphasizing the applicant's desire for self-reliance and the perceived right to carry a firearm for protection without detailing specific, objective threats. Option C, providing detailed documentation of specific documented threats or incidents that create a concrete and current danger to the applicant's personal safety, alongside evidence that these risks cannot be adequately mitigated by alternative means. Option D, submitting an application based on general concerns about rising crime rates in the applicant's region and a subjective feeling of insecurity. The correct answer is C, providing detailed documentation of specific, documented threats or incidents that create a concrete and current danger to the applicant's personal safety, alongside evidence that these risks cannot be adequately mitigated by alternative means. Explanation: the scenario of applying for a concealed carry handgun license in Italy, specifically for personal defense, Porto di pistola per difesa personale, presents a significant professional challenge due to the stringent requirements and the inherent risk associated with firearms. The applicant must demonstrate not only a genuine need for self-defense, but also a high degree of reliability and responsibility. The prefect's office, responsible for granting these licenses, conducts a thorough risk assessment, scrutinizing the applicant's background, character, and the objective circumstances justifying the need for a firearm. This process requires careful judgment to balance an individual's right to self-defense with public safety concerns. The best professional approach involves a comprehensive and transparent submission of all required documentation and information, directly addressing the prefect's concerns regarding the applicant's suitability and the objective need for personal defense. This includes providing concrete evidence of threats or specific circumstances that create a demonstrable risk, rather than relying on generalized fears or assumptions. Adherence to the specific requirements outlined in Italian law, such as demonstrating a concrete and current danger that cannot be mitigated by other means, is paramount. This approach aligns with the spirit and letter of the law, which mandates a rigorous evaluation of the applicant's trustworthiness and the objective necessity of carrying a firearm for personal protection. An incorrect approach would be to submit an application based on vague or unsubstantiated claims of potential danger, relying on generalized anxieties about crime rates or hypothetical future threats, without specific evidence of personal risk, fails to meet the legal threshold for demonstrating a concrete need for self-defense under Italian law. This approach neglects the requirement for objective justification and can be perceived as an attempt to circumvent the rigorous assessment process. Another professionally unacceptable approach is to omit or misrepresent crucial information regarding the applicant's personal history or any past incidents that might be relevant to their suitability to possess a firearm. Italian law places a strong emphasis on the applicant's character and reliability. Concealing or falsifying information undermines the integrity of the application process and can lead to immediate rejection, as well as potential legal repercussions. Furthermore, an approach that focuses solely on the applicant's perceived right to carry a weapon without adequately demonstrating the objective necessity and the absence of alternative protective measures is also flawed. The license is granted for personal defense, implying a situation where other means of protection are insufficient. Failing to address this aspect weakens the application significantly. Professionals advising applicants should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes thoroughness, honesty, and a clear understanding of the legal requirements. This involves meticulously gathering evidence to support the claim of personal danger, ensuring all documentation is accurate and complete, and clearly articulating how the applicant meets the specific criteria set forth by Italian law for the issuance of a concealed carry handgun license for personal defense. The focus must always be on demonstrating objective necessity and the applicant's unwavering reliability. Question 14. To address the challenge of evaluating an applicant for a concealed carry handgun license, Porto di pistola per difesa personale, in Italy, who has expressed a need for personal defense due to a history of minor disputes, which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework for risk assessment? Option A. Conduct a thorough risk assessment that meticulously examines the applicant's stated need for personal defense, their history of interpersonal conflicts, and any available evidence of their suitability for responsible firearm ownership, strictly adhering to Italian legal criteria for demonstrating a concrete and present danger. Option B. Focus exclusively on the applicant's perceived need for self-defense, while neglecting to thoroughly investigate their mental state and any potential psychological factors that might impact their judgment or ability to handle a firearm responsibly. Option C. Automatically deny the license based on the applicant's history of minor disputes, without a nuanced evaluation of the context and severity of these incidents. Option D. Grant the license based solely on the applicant's assertion of needing it for personal defense, without a rigorous investigation into the validity of this claim or their past behavior. Correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough risk assessment that meticulously examines the applicant's stated need for personal defense, their history of interpersonal conflicts, and any available evidence of their suitability for responsible firearm ownership, strictly adhering to Italian legal criteria for demonstrating a concrete and present danger. Explanation. Scenario analysis. The challenge in this scenario lies in balancing the applicant's stated need for personal defense with the stringent requirements of Italian law for obtaining a concealed carry handgun license, Porto di pistola per difesa personale. The applicant's history of minor disputes, while not criminal convictions, raises concerns about their temperament and propensity for conflict, which are critical factors in the risk assessment conducted by Italian authorities. A thorough and objective evaluation is paramount to ensure public safety while respecting individual rights. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that meticulously examines all aspects of the applicant's background, including their stated reasons for seeking the license, their history of interpersonal conflicts, and any available evidence of their suitability for responsible firearm ownership. This approach prioritizes a thorough investigation into the applicant's actual need for personal defense, as mandated by Italian law, which requires demonstrating a concrete and present danger, not merely a general fear or a history of minor altercations. The assessment must be objective, evidence-based, and strictly adhere to the criteria outlined in Italian legislation governing the issuance of firearm licenses, particularly concerning the applicant's character, reliability, and the genuine necessity for concealed carry for personal protection. This aligns with the principle of responsible firearm licensing, ensuring that only individuals who meet the legal requirements and pose no undue risk to themselves or others are granted such privileges. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to grant the license based solely on the applicant's assertion of needing it for personal defense, without a rigorous investigation into the validity of this claim or their past behavior. This fails to meet the legal requirement of demonstrating a concrete and present danger and overlooks the critical assessment of the applicant's character and reliability, potentially leading to the issuance of a license to an unsuitable individual. Another incorrect approach would be to automatically deny the license based on the applicant's history of minor disputes, without a nuanced evaluation of the context and severity of these incidents. Italian law requires a careful consideration of the applicant's overall character and suitability, not an automatic disqualification for every past disagreement. A blanket denial without due process or a thorough assessment of the specific circumstances would be procedurally unfair and legally unsound. A further incorrect approach would be to focus exclusively on the applicant's perceived need for self-defense, on neglecting to thoroughly investigate their mental state and any potential psychological factors that might impact their judgment or ability to handle a firearm responsibly. Italian regulations emphasize the importance of assessing an applicant's overall fitness, which includes their mental and emotional stability, to ensure safe firearm ownership. Professional reasoning. Professionals tasked with evaluating concealed carry license applications in Italy must adopt a systematic and objective risk assessment framework. This framework should begin with a clear understanding of the legal requirements, focusing on the demonstration of a genuine and present need for personal defense and the applicant's character and reliability. It necessitates gathering all relevant information, including the applicant's statements, background checks, and any corroborating evidence. Each piece of information must be critically evaluated within the context of Italian law and public safety consideration. The decision-making process should be transparent, documented, and defensible, ensuring that it is based on facts and legal mandates rather than assumptions or personal biases. This approach fosters public trust and upholds the integrity of the licensing system. Question 15. The review process indicates that an applicant for a Porto di pistola per difesa personale in Italy has a documented history of 2 minor public order disturbances occurring 5 and 7 years ago, respectively, for which they received warnings but no convictions. The applicant states a genuine fear for their personal safety due to their profession, which involves handling significant cash transactions in a high-crime area of Naples. Which of the following approaches best reflects the required risk assessment under Italian law? Option A. Focus exclusively on the applicant's current fear for safety and disregard the past disturbances as irrelevant to the decision. Option B. Automatically deny the application due to the presence of any past public order disturbances, irrespective of their severity or recency. Option C. Conduct a thorough investigation into the nature and context of the past disturbances, review character references, and assess the specific risks associated with the applicant's profession and location to determine overall suitability. Option D. Issue the license based solely on the applicant's stated fear and profession, without further scrutiny of their past conduct. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough investigation into the nature and context of the past disturbances, review character references, and assess the specific risks associated with the applicant's profession and location to determine overall suitability. Explanation. The review process indicates a scenario where an applicant for a Porto di pistola per difesa personale in Italy has a history of minor altercations. This presents a professionally challenging situation because the assessment of an applicant's suitability for carrying a concealed handgun requires a delicate balance between the right to self-defense and the paramount public safety interest. Italian law, specifically the Testo Unico del Legge di Pubblica Sicurezza, TULPS, and related decrees, mandates a thorough evaluation of an individual's character, reliability, and any factors that might indicate a propensity for violence or misuse of a firearm. Prefect, responsible for issuing these licenses, must exercise significant judgment in weighing the applicant's stated need for personal defense against their past conduct. A superficial review could lead to the issuance of a license to someone who poses a risk, while an overly stringent interpretation might unfairly deny a legitimate need for protection. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that meticulously examines the nature, frequency, and recency of the applicant's past altercations, alongside other character references and the specific circumstances justifying the need for personal defense. This approach aligns with the spirit and letter of Italian regulations, which require the prefect to be satisfied that the applicant is of good conduct and not prone to dangerous behavior. The assessment must go beyond mere record checking to understand the context of these incidents and whether they demonstrate a pattern of aggression or a lack of self-control that would render them unsuitable. This thoroughness ensures that the issuance of a license is based on a robust understanding of the applicant's overall suitability and adherence to the principles of public safety. An incorrect approach would be to automatically disqualify the applicant based solely on the existence of past altercations, regardless of their severity or context. This fails to acknowledge that minor, isolated incidents, especially those from the distant past or where the applicant was not the primary aggressor, may not necessarily indicate a present risk. Another incorrect approach would be to overlook these altercations entirely, focusing only on the applicant's stated need for defense without a critical evaluation of their character. This would violate the regulatory requirement to assess the applicant's overall suitability and could lead to the issuance of a license to an individual who poses a potential danger. Finally, relying solely on a superficial review of police records without further investigation or consideration of mitigating factors would be an inadequate and potentially negligent assessment. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a structured process. First, gather all relevant information, including the applicant's history, stated reasons for the license, and any supporting documentation. Second, critically analyze this information, paying close attention to the context and nature of any past incidents. Third, consult relevant legal provisions and guidelines to understand the criteria for suitability. Fourth, weigh the evidence, balancing the applicant's right to self-defense against the imperative of public safety. Finally, make a reasoned decision based on this comprehensive assessment, documenting the rationale clearly. Question 16. Examination of the data shows an applicant for a Porto di pistola per difesa personale in Italy has presented a detailed account of perceived threats stemming from their business dealings, supported by police reports of minor incidents. However, the applicant has no prior history of firearm ownership or training, and their psychological evaluation indicates a high level of anxiety, but no diagnosed mental health conditions that would legally preclude firearm ownership. Considering the Italian regulatory framework for concealed carry handgun licenses, which approach best balances the applicant's stated need with public safety concerns. Option A. Issue a provisional license contingent on the applicant acquiring basic firearm safety training, without a full assessment of the proportionality of their perceived threats or their overall psychological suitability for carrying a concealed weapon. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment, verifying the credibility and proportionality of the perceived threats, thoroughly evaluating the applicant's psychological state in relation to firearm handling, and assessing their aptitude for safe firearm use through practical testing and training requirements. Option C. Deny the license solely due to the applicant's high level of anxiety, regardless of the absence of a disqualifying mental health diagnosis or their otherwise clean record. Option D. Grant the license immediately based on the police reports, assuming the applicant's fear is justified and their anxiety indicates a heightened need for self-defense. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment, verifying the credibility and proportionality of the perceived threats, thoroughly evaluating the applicant's psychological state in relation to firearm handling, and assessing their aptitude for safe firearm use through practical testing and training requirements. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to demonstrate not only a genuine need for personal defense, but also the capacity to handle a firearm responsibly and ethically, as mandated by Italian law. The risk assessment process is crucial for the licensing authority to determine if the applicant poses an undue risk to themselves or others, and if their stated need is credible and proportionate. A superficial or overly lenient assessment could lead to the issuance of a license to an unsuitable individual, while an overly stringent or biased assessment could unfairly deny a legitimate need. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough and objective risk assessment that meticulously evaluates all aspects of the applicant's profile against the requirements of Italian law for a Porto di pistola per difesa personale. This includes a comprehensive review of the applicant's stated reasons for needing a firearm, verifying their credibility through supporting documentation and potentially interviews, assessing their psychological suitability and any history of violence or instability, and confirming their technical proficiency and understanding of safe firearm handling. This approach aligns with the principle of public safety while respecting individual rights, ensuring that licenses are granted only to those who meet the stringent legal criteria and demonstrate a genuine, demonstrable need for personal defense, as outlined in the relevant Italian legislation governing firearm permits. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to grant the license based solely on the applicant's assertion of fear, without independent verification or a deeper assessment of the underlying reasons and their proportionality. This fails to meet the legal requirement for a demonstrable and proportionate need for personal defense and bypasses the critical risk assessment of the applicant's suitability and potential for misuse. Another incorrect approach would be to deny the license based on a generalized assumption about the applicant's profession or perceived social status, without a specific, legally justifiable reason related to their individual risk profile or the credibility of their stated need. This constitutes an arbitrary and discriminatory assessment, failing to adhere to the objective criteria established by Italian law. A further incorrect approach would be to focus exclusively on the applicant's technical ability to shoot, while neglecting the crucial elements of psychological suitability, the genuine nature of their perceived threat, and the proportionality of their request for a firearm for personal defense. This overlooks significant aspects of the risk assessment mandated by Italian regulations, which consider the applicant as a whole person and their circumstances. Professional reasoning. Professionals tasked with assessing applications for a Porto di pistola per difesa personale in Italy must adopt a systematic and evidence-based approach. This involves understanding the specific legal framework, which emphasizes a demonstrable and proportionate need for personal defense, coupled with the applicant's proven suitability and responsible character. The process should be objective, fair, and transparent, requiring thorough investigation and documentation to support any decision. Professionals should be trained to identify red flags, critically evaluate claims, and apply the law consistently, ensuring that public safety is paramount while upholding due process for applicants. Question 17. Upon reviewing an application for a Porto di pistola per difesa personale in Italy, what is the most appropriate risk assessment methodology to ensure compliance with Italian firearms regulations and public safety? Option A. A thorough evaluation of the applicant's documented threats, vulnerability, and demonstrated understanding of firearms safety and legal responsibilities, requiring a clear articulation of a concrete and current personal safety threat. Option B. Granting the permit based on the applicant's subjective feelings of fear and general unease, without requiring specific evidence of threats. Option C. Prioritizing the denial of the permit based on any past minor legal infractions, even if unrelated to violence or current risk. Option D. Automatically denying the permit to individuals in certain high-risk professions, regardless of their individual circumstances. The correct answer is A. A thorough evaluation of the applicant's documented threats, vulnerability, and demonstrated understanding of firearm safety and legal responsibilities, requiring a clear articulation of a concrete and current personal safety threat. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to demonstrate not only a genuine need for personal defense, but also the capacity to handle a firearm responsibly and ethically, as mandated by Italian law. The risk assessment process is subjective and relies heavily on the applicant's ability to articulate and substantiate their perceived threats, while the authorities must balance the individual's right to self-defense with public safety concerns. The assessment must be thorough and unbiased, avoiding assumptions or personal opinions. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves a comprehensive and objective evaluation of the applicant's stated reasons for needing a concealed carry permit in Italy. This includes a detailed review of any documented threats, evidence of vulnerability, and a thorough assessment of the applicant's psychological stability and understanding of firearm safety and legal responsibilities. The applicant must clearly demonstrate a concrete and current threat to their personal safety that cannot be adequately mitigated by other means, aligning with the principles of difesa personale, personal defense, as interpreted under Italian law, which requires a demonstrable and serious necessity. This approach prioritizes a fact-based assessment against the legal requirements. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach would be to grant the permit based solely on the applicant's assertion of fear or general unease, without requiring substantiating evidence or a thorough risk assessment. This fails to meet the legal standard of demonstrating a concrete and immediate threat, potentially compromising public safety by arming individuals without a proven, legally recognized need. Another incorrect approach is to deny the permit based on the applicant's profession alone, without a specific, individualized assessment of their personal risk factors. Italian law does not automatically disqualify individuals based on occupation, but requires an evaluation of their specific circumstances and the credible threats they face. This approach is discriminatory and fails to adhere to the nuanced requirements of the difesa personale justification. A further incorrect approach is to focus excessively on the applicant's past minor infractions, unrelated to violence or public safety, as a sole basis for denial. While a criminal record is considered, the assessment must weigh the nature and recency of any offenses against the applicant's current need and demonstrated responsibility for personal defense. Overemphasis on minor, irrelevant history without a clear link to current risk is not aligned with the spirit of the law. Professional reasoning. Professionals evaluating concealed carry permit applications in Italy must adopt a structured, evidence-based risk assessment framework. This involves clearly defining the legal criteria for difesa personale, meticulously gathering and verifying all submitted documentation, conducting thorough interviews, and assessing the applicant's psychological fitness and understanding of legal obligations. The decision must be grounded in objective facts and a balanced consideration of individual rights and public safety, adhering strictly to the provisions of Italian firearms legislation. Question 18. When evaluating an application for a concealed carry handgun license, Porto di pistola per difesa personale, in Italy, what is the most professionally sound and legally compliant approach to assessing the applicant's risk profile and genuine need for personal defense? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that meticulously evaluates the applicant's stated reasons for needing personal defense against objective evidence and established legal criteria under Italian law, including a thorough investigation of their background and psychological suitability. Option B. Grant the license if the applicant expresses a strong subjective feeling of fear for their safety and has no prior criminal convictions, regardless of the specific nature or verifiability of the threats. Option C. Expedite the review process and approve the application if the applicant demonstrates basic firearm handling proficiency, without delving deeply into the specific circumstances or objective evidence supporting their claim of personal defense needs. Option D. Prioritize applicants based on their profession or social status, assuming individuals in certain roles or positions inherently require a concealed carry permit for personal protection. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that meticulously evaluates the applicant's stated reasons for needing personal defense against objective evidence and established legal criteria under Italian law, including a thorough investigation of their background and psychological suitability. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to demonstrate not only a genuine need for personal defense, but also the capacity to handle a firearm responsibly and ethically, all within the strict legal framework of Italian concealed carry licensing. The assessment must balance the applicant's stated need against objective criteria and potential risks, demanding a nuanced understanding of Italian law and ethical considerations. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a comprehensive risk assessment that meticulously evaluates the applicant's stated reasons for needing personal defense against objective evidence and established legal criteria under Italian law. This approach prioritizes verifying the credibility and severity of the threats faced, assessing the applicant's psychological suitability and training, and ensuring compliance with all provisions of the Italian Penal Code, Codice Penale, and relevant ministerial decrees concerning the Porto di pistola per difesa personale. It requires a thorough investigation into the applicant's background, a detailed interview, and potentially consultation with law enforcement or mental health professionals, all aimed at determining if the applicant meets the stringent requirements for a license, which are not granted lightly, and demand a demonstrable, concrete, and ongoing need for self-defense. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to solely rely on the applicant's subjective assertion of fear or perceived danger without independent verification or objective corroboration. This fails to meet the legal standard in Italy, which requires a demonstrable and concrete need for personal defense, not merely a generalized feeling of insecurity. Such an approach risks issuing a license to individuals who do not genuinely meet the legal threshold, potentially increasing public safety risks. Another incorrect approach would be to grant the license based primarily on the applicant's professional status or perceived social standing, assuming this inherently qualifies them for personal defense. Italian law does not grant preferential treatment based on profession or social class. The assessment must be based on individual circumstances and a proven, specific need for protection, irrespective of the applicant's background. A further incorrect approach would be to overlook or downplay any red flags or concerns identified during the assessment, such as a history of impulsive behavior or a lack of adequate firearm training, simply to expedite the process or accommodate the applicant. This directly contravenes the ethical obligation to ensure public safety and the legal requirement to assess the applicant's suitability and competence thoroughly. Professional reasoning. Professionals evaluating concealed carry license applications in Italy must adopt a systematic and evidence-based approach. This involves understanding the specific legal requirements of the Porto di pistola per difesa personale, conducting thorough due diligence, and maintaining an objective stance throughout the assessment. The decision-making process should be guided by the principle of public safety, ensuring that licenses are only granted to individuals who demonstrably meet all legal and ethical criteria, with a clear and verifiable need for personal defense. Question 19. The analysis reveals that an applicant for a Porto di pistola per difesa personale in Italy has a documented history of 2 minor public order disturbances occurring 5 and 7 years ago, respectively. The applicant has provided character references and evidence of stable employment since these incidents. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for the prefect's office in assessing this application? Option A. Automatically deny the application due to the presence of any past public order disturbances, irrespective of their severity or recency. Option B. Grant the license without further investigation, assuming that minor past incidents do not inherently disqualify an applicant. Option C. Request a psychological evaluation solely based on the existence of past disturbances, without considering other mitigating factors or the nature of the incidents. Option D. Conduct a detailed inquiry into the specific circumstances and nature of the past disturbances. Review the applicant's subsequent conduct and stability, and consider all submitted documentation to determine if the applicant demonstrates good conduct and absence of risk. The correct answer is D. Conduct a detailed inquiry into the specific circumstances and nature of the past disturbances. Review the applicant's subsequent conduct and stability, and consider all submitted documentation to determine if the applicant demonstrates good conduct and absence of risk. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario where an applicant for a Porto di pistola per difesa personale in Italy has a history of minor altercations. This situation is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced assessment of risk, balancing the applicant's right to self-defense with public safety concerns, all within the strict framework of Italian firearms law. The prefect, or their delegate, must exercise significant judgment to determine if the applicant's past behavior genuinely indicates a propensity for violence that would render them unfit to possess a firearm, or if the incidents were isolated and do not pose a current risk. The correct approach involves a thorough and individualized risk assessment that meticulously examines the nature, frequency, and recency of the applicant's past altercations, alongside all other submitted documentation and any available information from law enforcement. This approach prioritizes a comprehensive review of the applicant's overall character and stability, as mandated by Article 43 of the Testo Unico del Legge di Pubblica Sicurezza, TULPS, and related ministerial decrees. These regulations require the authorities to ascertain the applicant's good conduct and absence of circumstances that might suggest a predisposition to misuse a firearm. A detailed investigation into the context of the altercations, evidence of rehabilitation, and the applicant's current life circumstances is crucial to making an informed decision that upholds both public safety and individual rights. An incorrect approach would be to automatically deny the license based solely on the existence of past altercations, regardless of their severity, context, or the time elapsed since they occurred. This fails to comply with the TULPS, which requires a qualitative assessment rather than a purely quantitative one. Another incorrect approach is to grant the license without any further investigation into the nature of the altercations, assuming that past minor incidents do not preclude an applicant from responsible firearm ownership. This overlooks the fundamental duty to ensure public safety and could lead to a dangerous individual being armed. Finally, relying solely on a superficial review of the applicant's criminal record without considering the specific details of the incidents or the applicant's subsequent behavior would be a flawed and potentially unsafe decision-making process. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a presumption of the applicant's right to apply, followed by a rigorous, evidence-based assessment. This involves gathering all relevant information, critically evaluating its significance in light of Italian firearms legislation, and considering the applicant's overall suitability. The process should be transparent, fair, and focused on objective criteria, ensuring that decisions are justifiable and defensible under the law. Question 20. Comparative studies suggest that effective risk assessment for concealed carry handgun licenses in Italy requires a nuanced approach to financial capacity. An applicant, Mr. Rossi, claims a significant increase in personal safety concerns due to recent neighborhood incidents. His annual income is Euros 45,000. His essential monthly expenses, rent, utilities, food, transportation, total Euros 2,000. He has a Euros 10,000 personal loan with a Euros 200 monthly repayment. The estimated annual costs for secure firearm storage, ammunition, and mandatory training are Euros 500. If a responsible applicant should maintain a financial buffer equivalent to at least 3 months of essential expenses plus firearm-related costs, what is the minimum annual income Mr. Rossi would need to demonstrate to be considered financially capable of responsible firearm ownership, assuming his essential expenses and loan repayment remain constant? Option A, Euros 24,000. Option B, Euros 34,400. Option C, Euros 29,400. Option D, Euros 31,400. Correct answer is D, Euros 31,400. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the applicant to demonstrate not only a genuine need for personal defense, but also the financial capacity to responsibly own and maintain a firearm. The risk assessment involves quantifying potential threats and the associated costs, which are inherently subjective. Balancing the applicant's perceived need against objective financial realities and regulatory requirements demands careful judgment to prevent the issuance of a license to individuals who may not be able to safely and legally possess a firearm. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a comprehensive assessment that quantifies the applicant's financial capacity to bear the costs associated with responsible firearm ownership, including secure storage, ammunition, training, and potential legal liabilities. This approach aligns with the spirit of the Italian concealed carry handgun license, Porto di pistola per difesa personale, regulations, which implicitly require the applicant to be a responsible citizen, capable of managing the risks and obligations associated with firearm possession. Specifically, Article 407 of the Italian Penal Code and related administrative decrees emphasize the need for a demonstrated concrete and current need for self-defense, which extends to the applicant's ability to meet the associated responsibilities. A financial assessment that considers the applicant's income, expenses, and assets to determine a reasonable buffer for firearm-related costs ensures that the applicant can afford to maintain the weapon safely and legally, thus mitigating potential risks to public safety. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to solely rely on the applicant's stated fear of personal danger without any objective verification or financial substantiation. This fails to meet the regulatory requirement for a concrete and current need and ignores the financial responsibilities inherent in firearm ownership, potentially leading to the issuance of a license to someone unable to afford proper storage or training, thereby increasing risk. Another incorrect approach is to focus exclusively on the applicant's income without considering their overall financial obligations and the specific costs of firearm ownership. This can lead to an inaccurate assessment of their true financial capacity, as high income does not automatically equate to disposable income for firearm-related expenses. It overlooks the practical financial realities that contribute to responsible ownership. A third incorrect approach is to disregard any financial assessment and grant the license based solely on a perceived emotional state or a vague sense of insecurity. This is a direct contravention of the regulatory framework, which requires a demonstrable and justifiable need, encompassing the applicant's ability to manage the responsibilities associated with carrying a firearm. It prioritizes subjective feelings over objective requirements for public safety. Professional reasoning. Professionals evaluating concealed carry permit applications in Italy must adopt a multifaceted risk assessment framework. This framework should integrate the applicant's stated need for self-defense with objective evidence of that need, alongside a thorough financial assessment. The financial assessment should quantify the applicant's ability to cover the ongoing costs of responsible firearm ownership, including secure storage, ammunition, training, and potential insurance or legal defense funds. This systematic approach ensures that the applicant not only has a legitimate reason to carry a firearm, but also possesses the financial means to do so safely and legally, thereby upholding public safety and adhering to the spirit and letter of Italian law.